So, morning, Serena.
Morning,
As you
James.
know, a lot of founders are very interested in their health, and no better time than this kind of December, January, New Year's resolutions times. You and I have worked together solidly over the last year as well, and I thought it'd be good to educate our founders, as obviously we're helping founders of B2B tech companies, really take care of themselves. And I know that you talk a lot about whole shift wellness, the three F's, focus, food, and fitness. So it'd be lovely if you could share a little bit of insight into those three areas, how you came up with those, and why they're important as well to leaders and founders of companies.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's a brilliant question, and thank you for having me. This is a great opportunity to reach an incredible audience, which I know is already benefiting immensely from the work that you do. And now you're taking things to a whole other level by inspiring them to take best care of themselves. So kudos to you for being the change we want to see in the world, first and foremost. Let me introduce myself and Whole Shift Wellness first very quickly, just to create the context as to how the methodology came about. My name is Serena. My husband, Eugene Sabala, we run Whole Shift Wellness, which is a company that specializes in bespoke programs for time-pressed leaders. Between me and Eugene, we have over 20 years of combined experience in various fields of the health and wellness industry. This has allowed us to develop a proven method to shift you to your most fit, healthy, and confident self within 1 year, without resorting to any extreme dieting or punishing exercise routines. And our method was developed over, like I said, 20 plus years of work transforming the well-being of over 500 professionals across 5 countries. And this is really the answer, the partial answer to the question you just asked me, which is, how did we come up with the 3 F's? Where do they stem from? And how have we formalized our proven methodology? Really, the methodology stems from our personal and professional experience. Through the years, we started identifying what we believe now wholeheartedly, and have seen it at work, are the 3 fundamental pillars of your optimal, effortless health and well-being. So if you imagine your greatest self, your most fit, healthy, and confident self, as kind of standing atop a tripod, a structure with 3 legs. What happens to a tripod with even just one of the 3 legs is a little bit weaker than the others. Inevitably, that structure feels weak or wobbly, or it might even crash down. And we have seen that happen time and time and time again. And you might resonate with this yourself, because before you started working with us, you were doing some things revolving around your health and well-being. You weren't starting from scratch. You were already taking care of yourself in the best way you knew, but you still weren't fulfilling your potential. And we see this time and again, is that it's inherent in human nature to want to continue doing a little bit more on what we are already doing, or what we already see as working, or perceive as working, or perceive as being within our strengths. Nobody we've ever come across in our professional and even personal experience has ever created a strategy which allows them to grow, evolve, and strengthen systematically and consistently and sustainably all 3 pillars, all 3 F's, as we call them. And so it becomes virtually impossible to fulfill your potential, because there's constantly there is always an area that's a little bit weaker than the others, which creates a state of imbalance at the level of the tripod, at the level of the 3 F's. And so just to quickly share with your audience, the 3 F's, the 3 pillars, are focus, food, and fitness. So the goal in achieving transformation at the root level, rather than just temporary superficial change, is to develop such a strategy that is bespoke to you, to your unique challenges, goals, lifestyles, experiences, but which allows you to tackle all 3 pillars in a very systematic, very science-based, very sustainable way.
Yeah, it's very appealing for founders. Obviously, they're very growth orientated. As you know from your study, from your work, from your experience, that even in the focus pillar, the knowledge that people like to acquire. It's kind of like an aphrodisiac, especially in the eyes of founders, right? In that they have this yearning to grow, this learning to learn, and that they want to expand their companies, they want to expand themselves in terms of, like you said, fulfill their own potential. So let's look at the focus pillar a little bit more detailed to start with. It's an area that myself as a founder was an area that I really wanted to strengthen as well when coming to work with yourself and Eugene. And tell me about some of the typical habits. You can even share, one or two sort of parts about my experience, if you like, as well, in terms of some of the things that I was doing. I mean, from memory, obviously, my experience better than I do, because you're a sort of outsider and you have more observational capacity than me. But I know for me, it was, quite critical, quite self-judgmental as well. And sort of always thinking, to an extent, ultimately, you're sort of not enough or you're not achieving enough. And I think that's quite common within founders as well. But tell me about, some of the things you observed in that area.
Yeah, I mean, the focus pillar is by and far out of the three, the one that we see as being most undeveloped and misunderstood, generally speaking. This is not due to any personal fault. You're, like you said yourself, you're a very growth-oriented guy. You love to learn, but this understanding of how fundamental is to train our mind. Even our mind needs as much, if not more, training than our body does. Is still an area that is massively untapped, just globally speaking. In the global consciousness of humanity, we're only just now starting to realize how much power and control we have over our thinking habits, and how to apply this control in a way that is most effective. So inevitably that tends to be an area, and there's still quite a lot of misunderstanding. Some of the conversations around it sound a little bit too up in the air. It's not everybody really understands that there are some very pragmatic and practical things one should do every day to strengthen our focus. And so what tends to happen, which was some of what you were doing as well, which we've been working on for over the past year, is we tend to rely on whatever thinking habits have taken us this far, right? And so you're a very successful guy. You've achieved incredible things in your life. You've overexceeded your own expectations in many areas of your life. And still you weren't always feeling your very best. And this is because you had gotten there through thinking habits, belief systems that came from your past. You just inherited them from, maybe some of them from your parents, or some of them from society, or some of them from your environment, the school system, yada, yada, yada. It wasn't a conscious choice of what operating system was driving you to achieve your goals, or it wasn't as conscious as it can be. And so you did great, but you still didn't always feel that you were achieving things from a place of peace and of fulfillment, or joy, positive feelings and emotions, because you were leveraging this belief system that came from your past. So essentially the work that we are still doing on the focus pillar is the work of upgrading your thinking habits and belief system, so that now you can take full ownership of them, as you've been doing, and you can overexceed your own expectations, because it's literally like upgrading your operating system. We do it with our computer, regularly, so that it can function at its best. At the very fundamental level, that's what we do at the level. And what we've been lucky to do is we've been lucky to be able to develop a very proven step-by-step method on how to achieve these, whereby, and I'm sure you've experienced this yourself, within the context of just one session, through doing certain exercises, you can go from feeling one way and thinking one way about one scenario, circumstance, to completely kind of upgrading that and being able to all of a sudden transform your thinking and feeling around that very same specific circumstance.
Yeah, I've really liked the practice that you taught me around empty, shift, repeat. So certainly something I'd advise others to do, where on the empty side, obviously you have these thoughts that come into your mind and you sort of empty those out. Normally on paper is quite a good way. You could also use like a voice recorder or something with your iPhone. And then obviously you're writing, a different belief that is based on that point. And I think that's quite important for a lot of founders, is that sometimes you have those thoughts, but then it's also the feelings. So, the mind and the body are connected as well, which is really, really powerful, right? And then you can be in that sort of state of mind or that state of being that is, you're repeating a belief that obviously that becomes then the subconscious, and sort of automatic operating system that you have. And I think for founders, that's a really nice kind of easy exercise to take away some of those really high stressful environments, whether it's a funding round, whether it's a, legal challenge, whether it's a sort of HR issue with one of your employees, whatever it may be. I think, thinking and sort of reframing some of those beliefs really helpful.
Absolutely, absolutely. And those are the three fundamental steps of shifting your focus. You've nailed it. And it takes some practice to understand how to work these principles. Because, like I said, it's not something that we get to practice in our day-to-day life all that often. But like with anything else, it's a skill that can be acquired and developed and refined over a period of time. And you've done amazing work at that, and you're continuing to do amazing work at that. But it's never ending, essentially, because for any
Yeah.
new challenge that we face, something comes back to the surface that needs addressing. So that's why our process, it's an educational process above all else, because you really want to for these skills to eventually, sooner or later, become second nature to you.
Yeah. So they're sort of, like I said, on the subconscious level, and they're automatic and learned behaviors rather than ones that you're practicing. But it is quite, not to get too deep on it, but it is sometimes quite interesting that you sometimes have like addictions to these sort of chemical
100%.
feelings and emotions as well, especially even when you're trying to change. There's sometimes a little bit of inertia because someone's saying, the mind and the body is often saying, well, I know this way really well. I'm quite accustomed to this way of operation. Why do we need a new program? This one works perfectly well. So yeah,
Thank you.
it's a good point.
Thank you for saying that. That is so
Mm,
important. And it's important not to make us wrong. It's human nature to want to avoid change, because change uses a lot of energy, and we are
yeah,
wired to conserve energy, you
yeah,
know? So doing the good old thing, even if it's not conducive to us any longer, on a superficial level, is perceived as being less energy wasteful. So that's
yeah,
why we love the status quo, as painful as it may be. We're conserving.
yeah.
We think that we're conserving energy. So it takes a little bit of a push out of that comfort zone, because we're literally going against some deeply embedded instincts.
Yeah. Cool. So let's move on to food, as I know that's an area of your own interest and personal expertise, and you are a sort of shining beacon in this area in your personal life, as obviously as well as your professional life. So tell me about, I mean, even some of my practical things that you've seen me do, say, over the last year as well, and obviously that will probably spill out into some advice, obviously for other founders in our community as well. So even if you pick, I guess, some of the habits or maybe even some of the times of the day, if you just simplify it and say sort of, breakfast, lunch, maybe snack and dinner as sort of four typical things, or
Yes.
maybe you might have a mid-morning snack. So people have between sort of 3 to 5, you know, eating periods, I guess, per day.
Yeah.
Within those sort of 5 time periods, what did you see that were some of the practices that I was, employing at first, and what are some of the changes that I've made in those areas?
Yeah, I mean, food is probably, if we were to put the pillars in order of importance, I would say focus is above all else, because everything starts in the mind. But then immediately after is food, because the way we fuel our body is so fundamental to our energy levels, to our productivity, to our vitality, even to our creativity. This is what we don't sometimes fully understand is that there's foods that fuel all those positive feelings and emotions that make us better at what we do. And there's foods that instead sap our energy, take energy away from us. And so the single most important distinction, which I educate our shifters around, is understanding this distinction between foods which give you more than what they take away from you, because the digestive process is another energy expensive process. And then foods instead, which take away more than they give. So if you want to be productive, if you want to be creative, if you want to feel vital and you want to perform at your best, you need to gradually shift the proportions of the food that you eat more towards foods that give you without taking away. But the single most important thing, which stems from the single most common mistake I see anyone, to be honest, make around improving their nutrition is that you need to have a gradual, sustainable, and systematic approach, because that is what will allow you to embed changes at the root level without feeling too overwhelmed, too stretched, too deprived. In fact, even at the level just of your sensory experience, of your taste buds. And this is what we worked on over the course of a year. You've transformed your nutrition, but correct me if I'm wrong, this was a gradual, sustainable, and systematic approach. So the most effective suggestion I have is make it gradual, because your taste buds are used to what you're eating right now. So you're going to continue to craving what you're eating right now, because again, we go back to the same thing. The status quo is very comfortable. Every week, just take one of the main meals, whether it's 4 meals you have a day or 7 meals or 3 meals, and just look at how you can make some gradual and incremental improvements on that one meal and practice those new habits over just one meal for at least an entire week. Once that new habit has become second nature, it doesn't feel too stressful, it doesn't feel like a big job to undertake every day, then you look at the next meal and you do the same on the next meal. Gradual incremental improvement, and so on and so forth, until you've improved all your meals once, and then you start again from the top. And you gradually shift things in a way that is sustainable and yet effective, and you give time for those habits to be practiced in your life so that they become second nature to you.
I really like that approach, and some of the things that you certainly got me into, I think having a starting point for me, that was breakfast. When I look back over the year as well, was a great, and it's almost become a little bit of a cheeky line now. It's James's breakfast, but I think what I learned from that, it's a bit like, if anyone's read the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, it's a very good point, is that it's sort of setting up your environment, and then you have this sort of ability to kind of, a bit like Christmas tree habits, you get to lynch these things onto the tree, and then the tree is much more decorated than it first was. And I think that's the same with breakfast. When I started, I was having sort of a mixes of breakfasts. Then I started eating porridge more frequently. It made sense. It was early winter, it was January and February. But then sort of porridge became, porridge with some berries. Then it became sort of slightly more porridge in terms of to get more whole grains in. Then it became that with, flaxseed. Then it became that with, added nuts. Then it came that with peanut butter. Then it became, that with cinnamon. And then it became that with, tagging in sort of B12 and vitamin D as well into that routine. So it created this sort of time zone where it was very easy to really start the day off as you meaning to go on. And I think also one of the books that you referred me to And one of the exercises, How Not to Die, and then the Daily Dozen, which you can get on your iPhone or Android app as well. It just shows you how you can sort of, almost in that dopamine way, is that you're doing it in a good way. You're using dopamine in a positive way in terms of that
Absolutely.
sense of achievement. And
Yeah.
he talks about the Daily Dozen, and you can kind of score your progress on these certain areas. And I think then, the sort of dinner as well was probably a fairly good area of mine. But I think lunch, and I think that's probably for a lot of people, is a challenge as well. It's often I think for busy owners, it's really a time of convenience, and it really needs to be super convenient and obviously super nutritious at the time. So, however, convenient you can make that, whether that's sort of previous meals that you've had the previous night, whether it's pre-made things that you've made at the weekend, or obviously some pre-made things you might have like a soup or something like that, and added one or two ingredients to it, really, really helps. And
Absolutely. There's ways. There's a million hacks that
yeah,
we can look at. But the key and most fundamental thing is that you've got to look at your own goals. Like, for instance, the breakfast has continued to evolve around what you, James, needed to achieve, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
we were looking at, okay, so what's the next level for you? Okay, so how can we incorporate it in the breakfast, being that the first meal of the day, which made you feel really accomplished? It was like great for you to tick all those boxes with your first meal.
yeah,
And we continue to refine it over a longer period of time.
yeah,
And then we moved on to the snacks, and then we moved on to the lunch, and then we moved on to the dinner, and then we came back to the lunch, and we're still refining the lunch. So, but we never took a step that was longer than your body's capacity, because that would have felt, already you have a lot going on. We don't want you to feel more stressed, more overwhelmed. We want this process, it needs to be tailored to the individual, essentially.
And I think that's a really good point as well for people looking to change their nutrition. Often you might hear of or see, breakfast that I make, and you think, oh my God, that's sort of 9-10 ingredients or something like that you have within a space of 10 or 15 minutes. And it seems like overwhelm. But it's a recognition that I didn't start with those 9 things, that were all in one time period, that it was actually maybe 2, at first. It was just porridge, oats, and berries, as an example, which was frozen berries, which was a very easy thing to do. You warm up the porridge, you throw in the frozen berries, you give it a couple of stirs, and then you put it in a bowl and you eat it. It can't really get too much more simple than that in that sense. And then obviously you started adding more fruit to it, adding
gradually,
other nuts,
yeah.
adding the flaxseed, adding the B12, etc. But yeah, I think it's so easy to judge, and I think we do that in business a lot as well.
We
where,
compare. Yes.
we compare, and we see, this person's raised a Series A, they've raised 10 million. I'm not sure we'll be able to do that. And it seems so easy for them to raise 10 million, but we don't really know the story. We don't know the gradual progression. And also, with the benefit of hindsight, we always tell a different story ultimately to the one that happened at the time. So yeah, I think
very important.
Very good.
And with nutrition in particular, it's so important to honor our uniqueness with everything. There is no one size fits all when it comes to any of these. There's universal principles, but then how exactly it's going to happen is different for each and every one of you. Some people might not like porridge, so they hear you speak about porridge, they're already like, oh, blah, I'm going to have to learn to love porridge. I hate porridge. Then porridge is not for you. It's the how, it's not the what. It's the how that matters, Ultimately, it's about finding, especially with food, tailoring to your unique preferences and goals. That is so important, because there truly isn't. There are overarching principles of healthy eating, but then there's James, and James is different from Mark, John, Stuart, Ed, Sarah, etc.
Yeah. No, I hear you, and I think also that's the greatest opportunity as well, is that food is so abundant in terms of the variety, the different types of food that you certainly can't say
we're not lacking
everything.
options.
Yeah, exactly. So that makes sense. And just going back briefly, because we talked about porridge and morning, just going back briefly to the focus pillar. One thing as well was the morning discipline. And again, that was an area of sort of the triage or Christmas tree effect again in play, in the, had one base principle and that expanded. So to give, the listeners an insight, for me, that was waking up, that was drinking water, and doing some writing and journaling, I think, was my main practice that I did. And sometimes I might do meditation, but it wasn't very a regular practice. And that sort of morphed into, waking up, drinking water, having some essential vitamins at the early point, writing, meditating, stretching, doing some exercises, and on certain days doing cardio exercises as well. And then obviously sort of, into the breakfast and so forth. But I think it's what I've learned as well is that first sort of power hour, that you get, even if it's only 15 minutes. And I think
Correct.
it's good to have different almost cards or versions at play for every founder. Every day you're not going to necessarily have an hour. You might have to catch an early train, an early flight, whatever it may be, right? So you need to have sort of an hour version, maybe a 30-minute version, a 15-minute version of, those essential practices that you run each morning. Because then it's a bit like, we'll go on to fitness in a second, but if you've got multiple ways of achieving the same outcome, it's very hard to fail, because you have to kind of go through so many no's in order to get to a complete end state of no. And obviously your mind after a while just says, actually, yeah, let's just do it. So, you do something different. But yeah, I would definitely advise founders to have that sort of, that morning
Some sort of a
protected time.
morning routine, which thank you for giving the example of what yours looks like. But again, I want to emphasize that it's about finding the activities that work for you, and but there is something really powerful about the beginning of the day. It sets the tone for the rest of the day. So it's about developing the habits and the routines for whatever they might be for you, and for however long you might have capacity to do. But the moment, and I have my own routine, by the way, so I practice every single thing that I preach. I'm not, I literally, I see this in my life every single day, but there is something so rewarding about being able to like tick all those boxes of self-care within the first half of the day. It creates a positive momentum that reverberates through everything that you do for the rest of the day.
Yeah, that's a really good message as well, because you talk about energy a lot, and we'll go on to obviously talk about fitness, which is obviously another form of, building energy sources and stamina as well. But it's so true is that, if you have that morning protected time, you may have some great nutrition in the morning as well. So you kind of feed the mind and the body in all senses of the word. Then, by say 8, 9 a.m. in the morning, you've already felt like you've achieved so much in the day. And then, the day often takes care of itself. So let's move on to fitness, an area that is probably one of the most talked about areas.
Yes.
Lots of different methods. There are endless supplies of guides and ways, to get fit, to get healthy. What's your take on fitness? How do you see fitness?
So again, we go back to this holistic approach, which is what sets our methodology apart from anything else in the industry, is that myself and Eugene, and this is really Eugene's field of expertise. So I'm quoting him in every single thing that I say when it comes to fitness. He has developed this proven approach over his 20 years of experience, transforming the fitness of over 500 professionals across 5 countries, which is very unique. And you've experienced this firsthand, in that it is completely bespoke to your own individual challenges, goals, and physical predispositions. There is not one body in this world which is the same, which is the same as yours. There's only one James, not another body like yours in this world. And but it's also a very 360 approach. And at the forefront of our mind, always in everything that we do, is functionality, longevity, and literally the ease of living and performing your day-to-day activities, which is something that is not fully emphasized when it comes to fitness approaches, because some people put a greater emphasis on looks, and there's nothing wrong with looking good, by the way. We are big fans of looking our best, but if you make that the predominant goal, then you might resort to the wrong activities just for the sake of looking a certain way, and you might continue to not feel great. Whereas our approach allows you to feel great from the inside out, and then the looks will inevitably follow. But there are 3 pillars to fitness that you've got to take care of in one way or another. And those are strength, flexibility, and cardio. So the ideal fitness routine, which, by the way, looks different for you, James, than it would anybody else, because you have a different body, like I said, but it needs to encompass all 3 pillars of fitness, and it needs to continue to evolve as your body evolves, and it needs to, so the proportions will continue to change and evolve with you. But you will have, and you've experienced this firsthand, you've got to tick all 3 boxes: strength, flexibility, and cardio in whatever proportion your body requires.
No, I've really enjoyed that experience. I think one area that I didn't necessarily understand as deeper than some of the others was flexibility. And I think that is underrated and underserved in terms of the rhetoric, the written text and online text as well out there, is that, because you can grow quite strong, you can be sort of cardiovascular fitness that's often, got through high intensity workouts. But flexibility is a major thing. And I think in a remote working environment, that's almost even more important potentially than it was before, because, we're standing in, and sitting in similar places for longer periods than we were, because we're not traveling, to work. We're not traveling in between meetings, to different locations. So we're not on the move that we were previously. And I certainly felt that as well. Like even in my own body as well, when sort of COVID first hit as well, I actually had some what was initially sort of said as some leg troubles, and I'm trying to think what it was. Sort of they were saying that I had varicose veins at one point as well, which
circulation,
circulation,
circulation
which is very interesting. And luckily I diagnosed that I didn't have varicose veins, but the point was, is it was a wake-up call in terms of the circulation, my intensity in terms of number of sport sessions, number of movement throughout the day. I'm a very sort of energetic, sporty type of individual, so not moving as much was a big problem. And when that came up, it was a wake-up call to think, basically the doctor said, you're not moving as much, are you, as you normally do? And the answer was, no, I'm not. So I think, and that ultimately affected the flexibility, because you didn't have the same range of motion that you previously were, because you weren't sort of putting some strain on those muscles in order to expand and strengthen them. So yeah, I definitely encourage people to think about flexibility. I mean, Eugene himself is, incredibly strong and flexible, which he's
that's the goal. I mean, of course, he's the pinnacle of what's possible to accomplish. But he's worked on himself and his body his entire adult life. So it's like it's good to have him as kind of the pinnacle of what's possible to achieve. You can be incredibly strong. Like he can lift 2 times his body weight, he can lift 3 times me, and incredibly flexible. He can do some of the most advanced yoga postures there are. But you don't have to get to where he's at in order to experience the freedom and the joy that comes from living in a body that is pain-free, highly functional, that moves to the best of its abilities and capacities. And the risk with fitness, again, going back to just human predisposition, is that if you're a runner, you think that you need to run a little bit more to get fitter. Or if you enjoy HIIT or strength training, you think, oh, let me hit the gym an extra day a week or whatever. So you're constantly doubling down on the activities that you love and that you're already doing, but you're constantly reinforcing a state of imbalance. You were doing many things right. You were running, you were cycling, yada, yada, yada. But there was a fundamental state of imbalance, which was causing you to not experience that level of joy, freedom, and pain-free living that you're working towards now and that you've acquired over the course of this year.
Yeah, no, it's a major area as well, like to incorporate some of those yoga stretches and postures. And there was definitely imbalance, and then there's no better way to really do a litmus test on your balance than do yoga postures, because you suddenly realize, whoa, and you realize there's sometimes imbalance on one side to the other, not just an overall imbalance, which is quite interesting. And then obviously you spot tension in certain areas of the body when you're doing some of these postures and stretches. But also for founders out there, it creates another opportunity, right? Because you start to realize, yes, that certain area, my hip flexor, as an example, was quite tight, and you understand that certain posture and stretch improves that, and you see that improvement over time. So it's again another area to gain and to improve and grow. So that's a fantastic summary of the 3 F's and some growth points that I personally experienced, and hopefully many founders will as well. Just going into kind of Christmas and New Year, just to round off a couple of things that would help people in this time as well. Obviously, it is a time of sort of family, celebration, overindulgence. How do you set yourself up for success over the next kind of 30, 60 days, Serena?
Absolutely. No, that's a beautiful question, and thank you for asking it. And the tendency this time of the year is to kind of let all rules out the window and want to feel like, oh, you know what, whatever. Let me just overindulge, celebrate. I'll think about it in January. I don't wanna worry about anything. I've worked hard all year. What's the point? What's the point of starting now? That's the question that comes up a lot. What's the point of doing anything now that we're about to approach into the holiday season? I might as well start in January. And the truth of the matter is that this might perhaps be the best time to stop, ponder and think and create the space for a transformation in the new year. And this is interestingly the time that you signed up last year.
Yeah, it was.
You
it
actually
was in December.
It was December, just before the holidays. I have clear recollection because we actually did our last strategy session. We were already in Italy, and we did it from Italy. And you're like, you know what? And we go back to that principle that you were talking about. How you start the day determines how the rest of the day continues. When in some respects, how you end the year determines how the next year will start. This is not to say that all of a sudden you have to upheave all your routines and start this incredible regimen in the month of December, but you can set the intention, which is what you did, because then you went into your holidays and you did your celebrations. And so you didn't prevent yourself from enjoying Christmas, but you didn't use the Christmas period, the holiday period, as an excuse to neglect yourself. You actually used it as a motivation to go like, you know what, this is an area that I value and that I appreciate and that I know is going to allow me to achieve all my goals. So I'm actually going to honor it as this year ends so that I can start the following year on an even stronger note than ever before. So in fact, I would invite all founders out there to just take stock, take a look, do a little review. You do it with your business, most likely. You do a little yearly review with your business. Why not do a little yearly review of your health and wellness habits without beating yourself down? Just literally assessing, seeing what are the areas with most room for improvement, and just setting the tone, setting the intention for how you want your next year to be and what you might need to do in order for the year to be that way. And if you can take a tiny action, not everybody's prepared to do what you do and sign up for a shift, but you can take a small action to end the year with a new momentum, which will allow you to start the year with a new momentum. You know, you can get a copy of my book where our entire proven methodology is thoroughly explained, and just read the book through the holidays. That's enough. That's already a new initiative, you know, which will allow you to create new momentum and learn new principles. Just to give you an example of something very easy.
Yeah, there's also, I would recommend your scorecard as well to take the pulse of where you are. So you can check that out at wholeshiftwellness.com. You'll be able to find the scorecard there. So yeah, it's a good time to, like you said, assess, maybe take the scorecard, take sort of 5 minutes just to get your own score and, you know, review these 3 F's that we talked about today. But yeah, I think it's a good point is, you know, we have this time of reflection and review rather than a time of destruction and despair.
Right, correct.
I think, you know, it's a good time. Yes, we're not saying don't celebrate, don't, you know, indulge yourself for a little bit, but we're also saying that, you know, honor yourself and think about, you know, what's next year going to be made of, you know, where are some of those adjustments you're going to make going into 2022 to help you expand and grow your company and yourself as well. So thank you very much, Serena. That's really helpful. And I'm sure our founders will like today's content. And where's the best place to find you?
Wholeshiftmethod.com is currently a great place to visit, because like I said, for the month of December, we are gifting a free PDF or Kindle copy of my book to anybody that access wholeshiftmethod.com. Like you said yourself, the scorecard link, wholeshiftwellness.scoreup.com. Great little free tools, free gifts that you can start leveraging right away. And then we are very active on all social media platforms at Wholeshift Wellness, Instagram, Facebook, and I'm also on LinkedIn, Serena Sabala. So you can reach out to us from any of the main social media platforms.
Sounds good. Yeah, I definitely recommend the book as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that, and also reading about your personal story as well to make it all more personal. So thank you very much, Serena. That was great today. And well, I'm sure our readers will look forward to it. Adios.
Ciao for now.